Okay, so hello everyone. Hope you are all good. Hope you are doing well wherever you're joining in from. Welcome to our today's session, which marks the last user group event for the year 2023. So my name is Adeline Makoha. For those who don't know me, I'm part of the user group community, the user group Kenya lead, together with Tony and Mark. Unfortunately, Tony and Mark are in other engagements, so they have sent their apologies and they will be joining us today. So today we are glad to have our very own, one of us, Zippy. Zippy is here with us and she'll be sharing some insights about AWS. So without further ado, help me welcome Zippy. Hi, Zippy.
Hello, Adeline.
Yes, so over to you. Please introduce yourselves, and then you can do the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. Please confirm if I'm audible.
Yes, loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Wachira. I work as cloud solutions architect for an AWS partner called Silicon Overdrive. And this afternoon, okay. Hello. And today I'm going to be presenting on cost control and management on AWS. And essentially the motivation behind this presentation is I want to draw on some of the things that I've picked up in my interactions with AWS customers. There are a couple of things that I've picked up, which I'm going to call common mistakes that AWS customers make when they first start running their workloads on AWS. And this is not just limited to like enterprise customers. This is also just normal users, students, a curious person. When any person, when they start to interact with AWS, and some common mistakes that they make that usually results in them getting very high bills. And even as I say that, this is also part of my own experience, because first time when I created my own account for testing, I did not have the kind of information that I have right now. And I remember at the end of the first month after I created that account, woke up in the morning, checked my notification, and I see $20 has been charged on this card and something. And let me tell you guys, that hurts very much, especially if you're broke. But anyway, so this is me passing on the lessons that I've learned to save you some of these, to save you that same experience. So I'm going to share my screen and then I can start the presentation. Just give me a minute. Adeline, please confirm once my screen is visible. It is.
Yes, on my end, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let me stop video for bandwidth. Okay. So, cost control and management on AWS, I'm going to give some few tips and tricks that you can use in your own journey, in your own experience. And to start with, we're going to look at essentially two dimensions that relate to cost on AWS. First bit is on cost domains, And then now the meat of the matter is now actually cost management. And so cost domains essentially is, so give me a minute, please. Okay, so cost domains essentially it's the different aspects of cost that you need to be aware of, and there are 4 key cost domains in AWS. So first things first is you need to visualize your cost. You need to be able to see on a day-to-day basis how much am I actually spending, how much are the services that I'm running actually incurring in my account. So that is the first domain here, which is C, and it essentially deals with cost visibility. And you can see your running costs from within the billing dashboards, or by utilizing utilizing the cost and usage reports from the Cost Explorer dashboard. The second aspect is on saving. So once you see your running cost, this is what I'm spending, this is what I'm spending in my account, then the second aspect would be how do I save, how do I reduce this cost actually. And there are a number of offerings that are available to you in AWS. So very specifically for compute services, you can purchase reservations, you can use savings plans, or you can also utilize a service that is called a compute optimizer, which essentially assesses your compute services and gives you recommendations, or it gives you recommendations on like how to actually run them optimally. So for example, it will give you, if we take a service like EC2, because that's the most common compute service that we have on AWS, if you run compute optimizer on that instance, it will tell you, for example, if the instance is over provisioned, is it under provisioned, or is it actually running optimally. Then the other aspect is on now planning, and this deals with planning your cost and forecasting. So this is now when you start to think of the future. If this is a long-term engagement that you're looking at, then you have to determine how am I going to continue to manage my cost as I continue to utilize the services, of course, as you continue to expand your usage on AWS. So planning deals with one, setting up your budgets. That's a very crucial one. And there's also a feature on the Cost Explorer page that provides you with usage-based forecasting. This is something that you can also get from within the billing dashboard. You'll notice when you log into your account and you navigate to the billing dashboard, there's always a forecast amount that you're given. So you'll have your running cost, and then you'll also have your forecasted costs. So this is done based on your spending pattern. So it's very good if you've been there for quite a while, and maybe 1-2 months, if you've already been operating for maybe 1-2 months, then there is some data that can be used to actually create a pattern of your spend, and that is then used to create a forecast of what your spend will be in the next month or in the on planning. Then the final aspect is on running. So this is how to manage continuous operations. This is for your day-to-day access, what's happening in that account for day-to-day access. If it applies a bit more to let's say a company account, because there's going to be a lot of activities that's going to be happening, let's say in a shared account. There's new services being launched, could be new services being launched, it could be some changes being made, it could be testing that is being done, there's some sort of development that is being done. So how do you actually manage all that activity, or rather how do you allow everything that is necessary within your account, but at the same time making sure that all these activities by all the different teams or all the different users are not negatively impacting your costs at the end of the day, at the end of the month. So that is what continuous operations deals with. And under continuous operations, the key things there are about first, controlling access to your account. We'll look at this in a bit more detail a bit later. And also if it's an organization account, so if you're running multiple accounts, then we can also have, you can also consider the use of service control policies. Yeah, so these are essentially now the cost domain. So once it's a good it's a good way to think of your cost of essentially what are the different things that I need to think about, or do I need to consider when I'm thinking about maybe developing a cost management strategy. So how do I see, how do I save, how do I plan for future usage, and how do I make sure that my day-to-day operations are in line with my envisioned costs. So now the next bit, now we're going to look at now cost management themselves. And to start with, first things first is, one, you can't manage something that you do not understand. It will beat logic. And this is one of the biggest challenges that I have seen with some of our clients, is that you start to launch or provision services with really taking the time before that to actually read on or do some research or understand how exactly that service is priced. So you need to know like the different metrics of any service that you're going to utilize. What are the different metrics that the cost of that service is going to be based on? So this is where it comes, someone looks at their bills and they're like, oh my God, why is my database costing me this much? It's partly because you don't understand what aspects of that database are actually being charged and what is not being charged. So in terms of understanding service pricing, we have two good resources that you can use before. And this is, remember, this is before you even start to use that service, before you provision anything. Just understand, first of all, how it will be charged or how it's actually priced. So for this, there are two key resources that you can use to understand how any AWS service is priced. And the first one is the service pricing page. So the service pricing page is essentially for any service that's any AWS service. Let me take, for example, EBS. So let's say I want to understand how exactly are my EBS volumes being priced, or what am I going to be charged for if I launch a volume, if I create a volume, or if I launch an instance and attach a volume to it, what am I going to be charged for? So if you just search for, let's see, name of service and then the pricing, there is always that link that will lead you to a pricing page. And this page here will now, it's essentially breaks down everything that you are charged for that service. And it also includes, if it's a service that is eligible for the free tier, for example, this one, it also shows you how much, maybe if the eligibility is based on a certain amount of usage, it shows you how much of that usage will actually be covered by free tier cost versus how much of it will actually be charged to you. So it will break this down into detail details. What do you pay for, and how much exactly are you paying for each of these? So for example, for ABS, you can see it's the volume itself, and then there is the snapshots, and then there is also just other features that you can take advantage of if you're using snapshot restore or if you're using direct APIs. So you can access this for any service on AWS, your EC2s, your databases, your really anything. And the other key service for understanding how your services are charged is the pricing calculator. So the AWS pricing calculator, this one, it's typically used to help you to estimate your cost. So all the services that are supported for a given regions, you'll find them within this main console here. So for example, I want to understand if I'm using CloudFront, then what am I being charged? What am I being charged for? What are those cost metrics that I need to watch out for? So if you select your service, of course, you have to select your region, and then you fill in the data. For example, I'm envisioning spending 20 GB per month, or rather transferring 20 GB per month out of US, if I'm running out of US. If my origin is S3, maybe I'm envisioning spending or rather transferring 30 GB and maybe 1,000 requests. So the pricing calculator will show you two things. One, it will show you the expected costs. If you do actually provision this service, I expect that if these are the metrics that I'm going to be running on, then I'm going to be paying this amount for this service at the end of the month. And the other thing is that it breaks down what exactly are you being charged for. So for CloudFront, I'm being charged for my data transfer and the number of requests. So that is the first bit. Yes, so that is on understanding how it's how exactly services are actually priced or charged. So once you have that background knowledge, once you now understand, the next bit is on creating a budget. Now, this is a very, very critical step because remember, we've seen that the calculator can actually show you an estimate for all the services that you're running. If you feed in the data, it can give you an estimate of, at the end of the month, how much do I expect to actually be paying for everything that I'm running in my account. So with that in mind, then you need to make sure that your spend or your usage within your account, it doesn't go above what you want, what you're willing to pay essentially. And even without that background knowledge, let's say you haven't gone through the calculator, maybe you have no figure in mind of what you expect at the end of the month, there is always a ceiling. There is always a ceiling amount. You're like, I don't want to be charged any more than this particular amount. So that is where the budgets typically come in. And the good thing about the budgets is that they're quite easy to create, and you have multiple options for creating a budget for your account. So first things first, AWS does provide you with very well curated templates for creating a budget. If you are a new user and you don't particularly understand the mechanics of creating a budget, you can use a template. And I think for the templates, there is one for the free tier, which by default sets for you a budget of, I think it's $1, subject to confirmation. And then all these other budgets, the cost budgets, the usage and the savings plans and the reservations, they always set that at a minimum of $100. So it's a good starting point if you don't have enough knowledge to set up your budget. But if you do, if you understand exactly what it is that you want to see in your budget, exactly what costs exactly what costs you're looking at, then you can customize that, and then you'd need to feed in the actual data of how much do you want your usage to be evaluated against, what is that amount. So on that, there are different types of budgets that are actually supported. The two most common ones are what we call the cost budget and the usage budget. And really the difference between the two is just that for a cost budget, you set up a specific amount that applies to all the services that are going to be running in that account. So for example, I can decide I don't want to spend any more than $5 in any month. So in that case, I would just set up a cost budget and set the amount to $5. So even if I'm running 5-10 services, the aggregate cost of all those services should not go above $10, or I'll get an alert if it's any amount close to or above $10. Then for the usage budget, this one, it's if you want to get a bit more granular with your budget and you want to be very specific on what exactly it is that you want to control. So maybe you want to give free rein for setting up any service that you want, but you want to make sure, for example, something like the total volume of let's say S3 buckets that are created in that account does not exceed a certain amount. So in that case, you can get a bit more granular and use the usage budget to specify or rather to create a budget for a specific use case. So that can be maybe a budget for your data transfer, just that will apply only to data transfer and no other aspect of usage will be evaluating the account. Maybe it's something like the cost of your snapshots. If you're creating some sort of snapshots in the account and you've decided you don't want those snapshots to exceed a certain cost, then you can set a usage budget that speaks specifically to the cost of snapshots, and it will only look at that one cost and nothing else. So of course, you can set multiple of these. This is again depending on what exactly your need is, but for most people, a cost budget it's what they go for. It's very easy to set up, and the other advantage, of course, is the fact that it will cut across any and all services that are going to be running in that account. Yes, so from there, the other two types of budgets that are supported is also the savings plans and the reservations budgets. But of course, this only apply if you've got if you've purchased savings plans, or if you have reserved some of your instances. So this will also help you to track the costs that are being accrued by those instances. Then the other key features of budgets is that you can set up the reporting to be done on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, or annual reports. I mostly see monthly because it aligns perfectly with the billing period, the default billing period for AWS. And then you can create this budget for a single service, for an account, or an entire organization if you're running multiple accounts. So that is the first thing. So this is essentially an example of budget setup in an account. You just need to give it a name, something descriptive, something that's it's easy to identify. And then you set your budget amount. So for example, this is my budget amount. My budget for my personal account, it's only $5 for any given month, this is actually a cost budget. So if in any month my spend exceeds $5, then I will get a notification. Usually you have to set that up, and this is the notification that you actually get. So you set that up to an email. So if that amount exceeds, you get a notification that your costs have exceeded, and this is you can see it's exceeded by $2.50 from the budget that I've set. So the other aspect of this is that, notice this bit here that says the alert type. So there are two types of alerts that you can set up for your budgets. One is, as you can see here, based on your actual spend, and then the other bit is based on forecasted spend. So the difference between the two is that if you set your budget to set or rather to send alerts based on your actual spend, you'll only get the alert once your usage has exceeded, once it's above your budgeted amount. Now, the alternative to that, if you want something that is more proactive than reactive, then you can set up your budget to be based on a forecasted amount. So how that works is that based on your spending pattern, AWS always AWS will always give a forecast or calculate a forecast of your expected costs at the end of the month. So for example, if in November my spend was up to $10, then the forecast is that in December, it's very possible that my spend will maybe be $12 or $11. So that is usually the forecast. So you can choose, if you set your budget to be based on the forecasted amount, what it will do is you'll get an alert when that forecasted amount, and remember that's not your actual spend, it's just what the algorithm determines that at the end of the month, this is possibly going to be your spend. So if that forecast exceeds your budget, you can actually get an alert for that if you set it up that way. And that is good because your spend won't actually have exceeded your budget. It's just a forecast that it's very possible. So you can go into the account and look at what's causing that increase, if it's maybe something, and you can do some mitigations, brings the cost down. So that way you don't actually end up exceeding your budget at the end of the month. So those are the two types of alerts essentially that you can set up on your budgets, again, based on what exactly it is that you want in your account. What kind of reaction do you want? Do you want to see that before, or do you want to see it after? So that is on budgets. The other thing is on terminating. So we've all seen this meme. It's been making the rounds for a couple of months now. And it's funny until it happens to you. And it actually does present what is an actual problem when running in an not really AWS, really just any cloud environment. And this is something that's it's very easy to miss. And it is very, very easy to miss because most of us, we spend, if, for example, those of us who have personal accounts, essentially that means you're using that account to do some testing of something. And take a scenario, you've been testing and testing, you're very infuriated, you're very frustrated, it's 12 a.m., you're tired, you're sleepy, so it's like, you know what, I'll deal with this in the morning. But then the morning comes and there's a whole lot of things going on, and you forget that you left something on that you're supposed to get to. So that small amount of time, especially if you're not running on the free tier, remember these services, again, it goes back to understanding how these services are actually being priced. So if we take an instance that is the most common one, it is based on, EC2 instances are usually charged based on the compute time, and that is per hour, which means even if I run an instance for 5 minutes, I'll still be charged for the hour. And then there is the cost for the underlying volumes, whatever data is there, that I'll also be charged for that. So not if any resources that are not being utilized in your account, and this is especially if you're using an account for testing. So just make sure that once you're done, clean up your environment, clean up everything, and make sure you make sure that you actually do delete everything. Um, um, so the other thing on terminating, just something else that is to note is, for example, I think a good example here would be when you're working or creating VPC resources. So for example, you've created an instance, of course, it will have like a security group, it will have a subnet, it will, maybe you've created a custom access list for it, you've created some root tables and everything. Let's say there's also an internet gateway, maybe a NAT gateway somewhere. You'll notice some of these resources, they usually have dependencies, which means if you try to terminate it, it will fail. For example, if I want to delete a security group that is attached to an instance, I can't delete it because it's being utilized. Same way, if I want to delete maybe a NAT gateway that is attached to an elastic IP, maybe that is attached to a NAT gateway, or it is attached to any sort of a network interface, I can delete that until I remove that association. So that is something else that is very key to note. Note those dependencies between the different services. It makes that termination process quite easy, and it streamlines the whole thing. So that is the second one. Now, the other thing is on regions. So with regions, I've seen this more for people who are accessing the AWS console for the very first time. So it's usually very subtle and not very easily noticeable that sometimes when you log in, the first time you log in, or even for subsequent logins, sometimes AWS will just change the region that you're currently in. And if you don't take note of what region you're actually in, you'll find yourself launching and provisioning services in multiple regions. And then at the end of the day, you're being charged across regions that you're not interested in. Now, this would be a very big problem if you're working in a large team where, say you have, let's say you have a large team and you have some members of that team who are not very knowledgeable in AWS. Maybe you have one or two who are knowledgeable, but because guidance was not given at the beginning, once you give access to these guys, because they have to do stuff, maybe they have to learn services, maybe they have to test, deploy something. But because guidance is not offered at the beginning of this process, the people without that knowledge, who have that deficiency, who have, that deficit of knowledge, of understanding that you need to check that once you log in, you'll find that they may end up creating or doing tests or just provisioning services in very expensive regions, and maybe regions that are not allowed maybe by or where you don't want to run in. So it's very critical, and this is if for those of us who actually support maybe clients who are new to AWS, who don't have the know-how. It seems like a very small detail, but it's very important to notice, or rather to just make them aware that once you log in, the minute you log in, just make sure you're in the correct region before you do anything, before you go start creating things, before you start modifying things, just make sure you're in the correct region. Yeah, so just to emphasize on that, you'll notice that once you look at your bill, they're usually broken down by region. So if I'm running, for example, I have I launched one EC2 in Ireland, I launched the other one in Cape Town, then when I'm looking at my bill, I'll notice that all those regions will be broken down here. So for example, you can see for SNS here, it's been billed across 2 regions. So it's very important just to make sure there is that consistency in usage. And again, this is if there are multiple people who are utilizing a single account, and there may be some of these people who don't have the know-how could check for this. The next one is on cost management tools. And so there is a lot of these. If we just navigate to the billing dashboard, you have a whole lot of options. But it's one thing to have the options, it's another thing to understand how to actually use them, because if you can move there, you can see all these beautiful names, but if you don't actually understand what each of these services offer, what are their capabilities, what kind of features do they support, how granular do they get, how do they integrate with all the other services in my account, what are they collecting, and all those details, then essentially they won't help you in your cost management strategy. So these are just a few of the tools that AWS offers to just help you to manage, to visualize, to plan your costs. And the most common one, and the one you should know very, very well, is of course the billing dashboard. This is where you see your running costs. This is where you see your forecasted costs. This is where you see that breakdown of how much am I spending? How much did I spend in the previous month? What's the pattern here? Is my spend increasing? Is my spend decreasing? Then there is Cost Explorer, and this is a very, very good feature because it's a lot more detailed. It has so many more features. For example, this is where if you want something that's more visually appealing, you can get your dashboards. This is where you get your reports. This is where you get your filters. This is where you set up your what are they called, your cost categories if you need the categories. Essentially, Cost Explorer, this is where it gets very granular once you want to get into the nitty-gritties of what you're seeing on the billing dashboard. So that is where you can do all that, and it's a lot to take in. It's because there's so many features, and some may be relevant, some may not be relevant. For example, something like anomaly detection may not be it may sound very exciting, but it may not be something that's actually necessary. So the key is actually explore, first of all, look at what exactly is being offered, then understand of all those offerings, which ones are actually of interest to me. So the most common ones that's will get you over the line is the cost and usage reports, and these are very good because they get very granular. You can actually see your cost on a day-to-day basis. How much did I spend yesterday, today, the day before? So if you don't want you don't want to see an aggregate of an entire month, then the usage reports will give you that. And of course, they'll also show you your pattern of spend over a period of time. If you want to see that, they'll give you the graphs to help you compare, to help you track that, and so many other really awesome details that relates to your cost that would actually go a long way in helping or informing your choice, informing your cost management choices. Then so budgets we discussed. The other thing is on the cost allocation tags, and this is just a tool that is provided to you to help you to better track your costs. So for example, if minutes. Okay. So for example, if you want, maybe you have let's say different teams, or rather let's say different projects, and you want to see the costs that are associated with each of the projects or each of the teams, rather than seeing an aggregate of everything that is being, like an aggregate of all the costs that are being incurred in the account, then you can use the tags. So you really just have to assign the tags to the different services based on what exactly you want to filter that on. And then your costs, you'd need to just set that up within, again, Cost Explorer, and then you'll be able to see that breakdown based on the tags that you've set. And another very I guess it's more of a related feature where that allows you to essentially group your costs when you're trying to get a bit more granular, is something that we call the cost categories. Again, this is something that you create groups, cost groups that make sense to you, cost groups that are easily identifiable to you. How exactly do you want that breakdown to be done? So you create those different groups based on whatever is the activities that are occurring in that account. And then that usually populates to your budget, it will populate to your reports, it will populate to your dashboard, and you can see now separate dashboards for the different groups that you actually create. So that's another very handy tool when you want to, I think that will be in the planning phase. In the planning phase. Yeah. Then next bit is on cost governance. So governance, it's not so much directly related to cost, but it's more on the factors of cost. And what I mean there is, we've had a good way to understand this is, we've all heard of these reports. There's been quite a spike. An account was breached, and then the hacker went and launched some services using it for crypto mining and all that. So even before we get to the cost part, where that's kind of launching that big instance using that much processing power, it's going to really send your bill to an insane amount. The first bit is that there was a breach. And why was that breach? It's because it could be a weak password, it could be maybe bad storage of credentials. So part of cost governance one is, how are you actually managing access to your account? Who gets access to your account, and how do you protect the access credentials? So one of the key things to note here with regards to access management is that the use of multi-factor authentication is quite key here, because a password can be cracked. But if you combine that with multi-factor authentication, it does make your account, it improves the level of security of your account, and it does reduce the risk of a breach happening to your account. So that also reduces the risk of some bad actor. And this can also be an internal person without the know-how, without the proper guidance, but a bad actor from getting into your account and messing around with stuff that will cause your costs to spike. So that's the first aspect of that. Then there is also the service control policies. Again, this applies if you're running multiple accounts and you have an organization kind of structure set up. So you can set up policies for access. You can set up policies for example, limit the kind of resources that can be provisioned in your account. For example, limit the instance size, or like set a policy that only up to this instance size can be provisioned in this account. And what that will do is that even if a bad actor did get access to the account, or maybe someone tried to accidentally chose the wrong type and they're trying to provision that, because there is a policy in the management account that says this particular size is not allowed, then that will not that resource will not be provisioned, which again will go a long way in preventing you from getting those from your cost actually spiking because of accidents or bad actors in this case. Then the other bit is on cost categories, which I briefly described. And these are just groupings that you create to help you visualize your costs better. So this can be based on any sort of grouping that makes sense to you, whether it's you're running multiple projects and you want to see the costs per project, whether you're running multiple teams in the same account and you want to see cost by team. So all that, you can create those cost categories, and then they will populate across your reports, they'll populate across your budget, they will populate across your forecasts and all that. So that is on governance. And the last bit is on right sizing. So right sizing, essentially there is 3 aspects to this. And the first one is on resource selection. So what kind of resources are you actually provisioning, and are they aligned to the requirements or the needs of your workload? Don't over provision, don't under provision. And a good way to get around this, because in most cases, or in some cases, you may not know with absolute certainty what exactly are the requirements of the resource requirements for your workload. How much maybe vCPUs will they need, how much storage will they need, just so you can provision the right amount. So if you don't have prior knowledge, then a good way is to actually do it's called load testing, where you simulate different levels of load, and then you see how exactly your application or your resource responds to those different levels of load. And then if there is a constraint, you can actually identify that point, and then you can use that to inform your decision on what size do I need, what size of a resource do I actually need that will serve the needs of my workload, the needs of my application, the needs of my application. So resource selection is critical because, remember, again, going back to understanding how exactly services are charged. If you over-provisioned, the higher you go, the more expensive it gets. So if you over-provision, that means you're going to be charged high amounts, and it's going to be unfortunate because you're not even utilizing all of what you're paying for. So it's very important to make sure that you're running the services that you have, you're running optimally, and they're aligned to your workload requirements. So the other thing is on monitoring, which is also very key. key. So this is tied to making sure that your utilization. So the good thing is that for most, or I think it's all, let's say for most of the AWS services, they have default metrics, utilization metrics that are collected, and you can use those to actually monitor. For example, you can monitor something like the CPU utilization, how much memory is free, how much memory has been used up, what is your storage, how much of that is free, and how much of that is has been used up. So this will also help to inform if the size of the resource that you've chosen, if it aligns with your requirements. So if the utilization is very low, chances are you have over provisioned. If the utilization is very high, chances are you have under provisioned. So the tool for this, of course, is CloudWatch. And the thing to note here is you have to, one, understand what kind of metrics are actually supported for each of the different services, because not everything is actually supported. Sometimes you may need to bring in a different tool if you're looking to monitor something that is not natively supported by the CloudWatch tool. And then the other thing is now knowing how to analyze the CloudWatch output, because if you're just collecting data but you can't read what that data is telling you, then that's it's not going to bring in a lot of benefit. So first, collect your data, yes, but also interact with CloudWatch service, interact with the different features, interact with the dashboards, with the logs, with the groups, with the metrics, and then understand how to actually read the output that is given to you by CloudWatch. And once you understand that, then you can be able to actually determine what exactly is that data telling you about your resource. And then finally, it's on Cost Explorer. I discussed this, all the different features that are provided for you. It also includes a recommendations page. This is usually specifically for EC2 instances. So if it analyzes the utilization of that instance, it will give you recommendations of whether that instance is eligible, for example, a savings plan, and how much you can potentially save if it's eligible for reservations, and how much you can potentially save by reserving that instance. You can also get the same recommendations from the compute optimizer service, but essentially what this boils down to is make sure that the resources that you use, the amount of for the services that you use, the amount of resources that you actually assign to these services, make sure that they align to your workload requirements to avoid being charged any more than you actually need to. So that's basically it from me. I don't know if there are any questions. Adele, are there any questions in the chat?
From the chat, we have none so far. Guys, if you have any question, feel free to ask. Can unmute, type.
I have a question. Do you normally charge when maybe a company is consulting on the best practice of billing or for buying credit?
Sorry, please come again.
Okay, my question was, so for the part of, do you normally do like consultation whereby you charge a company to guide them like this is the amount of credit you should buy, this is the billing you should subscribe to, such kind of things?
Okay, so yes, we do, but we usually do that as part of what we call the well-architected framework review. So for the review, you get an assessment of your AWS environment, everything that is running. You get an assessment based on the pillars of the well-architected review, but we also have an option where if you specifically just want a cost optimization assessment, then we also do provide that for you. So we will run that review in the account and then give you best practice recommendations based on the data that is collected, and also help with remediating some of the findings that are pointed out in by the review, essentially. I hope that answers you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions?
Hi, Zipporah.
Hello.
Hi, Kevin here. So I wanted to ask something, especially regarding just that last slide that you just put up on right sizing. For example, you usually see certain resources, for example, like an EBS volume, you can decrease the volumes. You cannot decrease the volume size. You can only increase it. And maybe other resources which you might suggest that the client would have used a smaller, because of their business requirements. So how do you navigate these challenges? For example, they just can't, they over provisioned, and now you cannot really essentially right size. So according to you, and what in terms of best practices, what do you usually recommend? Thank you.
Okay. I mean, it gets a bit challenging if there's only like one aspect there's only one aspect that you want to right size. So for example, you only want to reduce the storage without really changing let's say the memory and the CPU. So the challenge comes in because unfortunately the way that AWS services are sort of are created is that the different types they come pre-configured with those resource configurations. So for example, if we use an EC2 instance, the size of that instance is it's essentially it's a combination of the number of CPUs, number of memory, and the number and of course the amount of storage. So unfortunately, it's not possible to just take one without taking the others. For example, if you want to retain maybe the 2 and the 4 but reduce the storage, it may not be possible. In some cases it is possible. So what I would recommend is I think my approach there would be to look at the different configurations and see if there is a supported size for the kind of configuration that I want. If there isn't, then unfortunately your hands are essentially tied there, and you'll have to stick to the pre-configured sizes.
Thank you. And maybe for example, for a case of mine, I think the client just had to migrate the data to a new smaller volume. It was so hectic, but that was the only way we could deal with the cost issue. Sometimes these things I think are there are trade-offs. You have to make trade-offs sometimes. Yeah.
No, that's very true. Thank you.
Azipi,
yes,
we have one more question on chat. First, we have a comment. That was a great presentation from Dan. And
thank you.
Imo is asking just a random question. I am a newbie. Have you used those new AI services, e.g. Amazon Bedrock, in a local business setting? Reference to the Kenyan market. Are the costs manageable, or the businesses haven't utilized so far? Any input?
Okay, so unfortunately, no, I have not. Yeah, no, I have not. So I can't comment in terms of costs for the new services. But if there's anyone else in the audience who maybe has explored them a bit more, they can provide some insight there.
Okay, Timo, hope that answers your question. Yes, so it's 5 minutes past 5. Yeah. And I'd like to take this opportunity once again to thank Zippy for creating time and for creating time to do the presentation. It was so insightful, more so when it comes to terminating of the instances. Understand that is what we like tend to do, to forget to terminate the instances. Yeah, so other than that, we'll just do like a random screenshot. So I'll urge everyone to turn on their video. We do a screenshot. This is our last event for this year. Yeah. Yes, if you have any questions, Zippy, you can share your LinkedIn profile, your Twitter handle. Guys will reach out to you. Yeah. Yes, so I'm waiting for Kevin. I'm waiting for user Timo, Robert, William. Yes, so we can say like, I don't know, something costs. AWS cost and optimization. Yeah. In the count of 1, 2, 3, we go. I'm expecting all of us to unmute and
That's optimized.
yeah, so thanks once more, Zippy. We really appreciate it. And thanks guys for training our response. Yeah, I understand most of us will be going into the mandatory leave as from next week, or yes, for the festive season. So I want to wish you all the very best during this break. Guys, close your laptop, go there, Mwende Diani everywhere. to January with that momentum to start another new year, 2024. So Merry Christmas in advance and happy 2024 to everyone. Thank you and have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Adelaide.
Thank you and bye.
Bye, Fatma.
Thank you and bye.